push it out. It's pretty cute and pretty okay. And I tend to like it with the zipper over there because I'm right-handed. And like I say, if you wanted to sew, I would have done that before if I were going to do it, but if you wanted to sew on a stuffed flower, you could. And so we'll learn how to make those soon. And I think this would be a pretty sweet bag like that. I think it's pretty cute like this. For those who are interested, you can see me make the raw edge applique for the body of this bag after the tutorial. I am going to make the bag have a curved top, which is one of my favorite things to do, and then I'll probably go ahead and box the bottom, so we'll talk about that. And I have these different colored zippers, and all of these colors look nice, but the thing is, for what I'm doing, I would really like to have this big, that's a very big pull on that zipper. And this zipper is too long, but what I'm going to do is shorten it, which is really doable. I like to do these tops so that they curve. And I could go square this up on my mat, but I don't feel the need to, as long as it's pretty rectangular and I've come far enough to the edge everywhere. So to do this, all I'm going to do is fold this in half and then take a pair of scissors. I'm going to cut this to a curve like that. There, I like that. And then I'm going to do this. And to apply it, we want it to end up like this. But we want this turned under. And so to do that, we're going to sew this, what essentially is right sides together. See, from the needle to the guide is just about 3/8 of an inch. There are a lot of ways to put in a zipper so that they look nice. You can show more or less of the zipper, and depending on what you like, you can get really close to those teeth, or you can have a really nice strip of the zipper showing. It just depends on your preference. I have contrasting thread so that you can see exactly what I'm doing, but if you use black thread, it can look neater as you're learning how to manage a zipper. Backstitch the ends. Then what I need to do is put this one on in the same position. So you can see if you zip this up. This one needs to go sewn right sides together here. So I'm just going to hold that, and I'm going to do that. And this time, in order to get this right, I'm going to be careful, and I'm going to go from this side. And the reason is that when you're sewing two layers together and they're feeding under here, always there's this tendency to go this way. And so I've got the zipper, the pull end will be on this end on both. And if I sew this way and then sew this one starting on this end going back, it'll tend to slip differently, and my zipper won't be matched up. And usually you can compensate for that if that happens, but if you try to sew them from the same end, even though you've got a different piece on top, it will help compensate for some of that. So that's what I'm attempting to do. You have a little bit of play here. I'm just getting these stacked one right on top of the other. It is actually easier to sew in a zipper a nylon zipper like this that is too long than to sew in one that is the proper length. You just have a little bit more play down on this end. And always check your zipper before you finalize, because if you've miscalculated, you want to redo it. Okay, so that's what my zipper is going to look like. But I'm going to finish it off a little bit. This is a 3/8 inch part, and I want it to be shorter than my zipper, which is pretty close to 3/8 too. So I'm going to trim off about half of what I've got extra here. I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to cut, and I'm going to go slow and make sure that I don't accidentally cut my zipper. Don't go too close because you don't want your zipper stitching to fail. Usually when I do this stuff, I'm making several at least, and if not, you know, a dozen or whatever, and I can position things so that it's as easy as possible to do instead of positioning it so that the camera can see it. This is what we're trying to do, and I'm going to press from the back, and I'm going to use a lot of steam. I'm planning to do 3 different cosmetic bags, and I don't know if they'll be in a row 1, 2, 3, but they'll be before Christmas. I'll reposition. My needle's kind of low. Okay, so I'm just going to put my guide right there. But if I do a bag and it's like this, I'm okay with that, because I really don't think most people are going to go into this part of the bag and lift this up. But it could actually be a little wider. Sometimes I've finished this raw edge beforehand by either zigzagging or not binding, nothing that'll add bulk. You could also cut it with pinking shears, but I'm okay with this. Like I say, it's just something that everyone has their own ideas of what's okay and what's not, and I think that's okay. So here's what it will look like. So to turn it inside out, it helps a little just to undo the zipper, and then you zip it up this way. You really don't want to cut off your zipper prematurely, because then you can unzip it and you can usually get it to go back together, but why do that to yourself if you don't need to? When you sew this zipper, you really want to keep this like this. You can make it go one side or the other, and with certain designs you'll want to do that for sure. But for what I'm doing, I really want this to go like this and be square on the end, where I'm going to pin that the way I want it. So I'm actually past my pin so that my needle can't hit my pin. And I'm going to sink into my fabric. And then I'm going to stitch this. I'm using a 5/8 seam allowance. I'm going to trim a little bit off. I want to finish off a smaller seam than that. But I'm going to start going. And then I'm going to back stitch a little. And I'm going to back stitch all the way up to that zipper. There isn't one way that I always stitch these sides. There are different kinds of anomalies you're working around if your sides aren't quite evenly matched. You might fudge a little bit one direction or another. So there's some variables that you're working around in the construction. I tend to stitch these between 3/8, which I'm doing on this side with my zipper foot, and 5/8 of an inch, but I end up trimming them down to about 3/8 regardless, because that's about what I want to bind when I finish off this seam on the inside of the bag later on. So what you want to do is find your junkiest scissors, and you want to trim this down to where it's pretty close to 3/8. And then this side you want to trim too, about the same. We're trimming off quite a bit more on this side. And then you're just going to cut through that zipper, which should be okay. But don't use your best scissors. To grade this, we just try to cut the top part of the quilt sandwich off and leave a nice margin here so it won't rip out. But this way you don't have all that bulk. And when you bind that and you push it down, it's going to tend to flatten out a lot better than when they're full thickness. And honestly, I usually do not grade them, but that's why I bought the machine I have. If I didn't have that, and I had my old machine, or certainly the Singer that I learned how to sew on when I was a girl, I would grade these quilt seam allowances for sure. We're gonna bind with this, and I just made this with the bias tape maker. This is the size I use, and I'll show it on the screen. And you cut your fabric. I just go from selvage to selvage, and you cut it 1 7/8, and then you feed it through there with a pin. I think I have film, I can show you that. And you run it through your iron, and as you're pulling it through, you iron across this and with steam, and this faces down this way as you're doing it. If you do it this way, it doesn't work as good. This is the proper way to feed through. Okay, and I'll try to show you that with some old footage. And you should be able to see what I'm doing here with this. So what we're going to do is we need a piece that's a little bit, it doesn't actually have to be longer on this side, because we're going to square this side off, so it doesn't need to be longer than that, but it does need to be a little longer than this side. And just so that I don't have any trouble, I'm going to just cut that like that. And with any of this, if I'm not able to put my seam line right where I want, I will always just kick my needle over. And that's true always. And if this stitching under here ended up showing, that wouldn't bother me that much. As long as the edge next to it is finished off like this, I don't mind if I don't think you're gonna in this case, but if you saw an extra line of stitching, I mean the whole thing's full of stitching because it's quilted. So this is a little more than 3/8 that I'm stitching here. I'm going to sew right up to the edge and then go backwards. Okay. So I'm just going to do this. A lot of this, you just get in a rhythm. Now I've got this metal here, I do not want to hit that. I'm trying to take this, and instead of just having it all square, I'm going to turn this, push this over a little bit, and then I'm going to push this over that way a little bit, and then fold in my edge, and then fold it again. And then once I have all this, I'm going to put this in the machine. And if you can see right here, this doesn't perfectly match up on the end, and that's okay with me. As long as it looks pretty neat, because it's the inside of a bag, I don't need this to be perfect. I think it's still nice to have it finished off, even if it is not perfect. And the more you do, the better they get. So I hope you can see what I'm talking about here. So I'm just going to fumble with it a little bit and get it to where I want it. Then I'm going to get it on there. And anywhere that it's not wide enough, I'm just going to open it up a little teeny bit wider so that I can really get a good bite of this top fabric. And you know, I gave my sister one about this size, and I've had some customers who I'm pretty friendly with, and one of the things that they tell me they use them for, which I might use this for myself, when they travel, they'll put all their charger cords in one of these. So if we did push the corners all the way out, this is what we'd have, which I think is darling. But I am gonna square these off, and I'll show you what that's gonna look like. It's gonna look like this, which I think is really, I do think it's darling. I like it. Now I don't know, you know, I don't know what you guys know. So I don't know if you've ever done this. And so what I'm going to show you is what we're going to do basically is sew across here and cut it off, and then we're going to bind that end just the same way we did this. And that's how we're going to finish off our bag, because years ago my husband and I decided that this quilting in here was a feature. And while I was turning liners into my little bags and purses, we thought people should be able to see all this work on the inside. And so what we're going to do, this seam line should really cut this into two equal points. They should equal each other. And you could use something to measure that and try to do them exactly evenly. Like I can do this, and I don't want to do too much. Say I cut an inch off of this, because it's going to sew smaller than that. And then I can mark it. And sometimes you'll do one of these and it's not very even and it doesn't look very good, but you have to mess it up pretty bad for it to not still be good. I'm just going to cut this off. So this is what you're actually doing. So some people, when they do this, they actually just cut a square out. But you see the square has sides that are equal from here to there, from here to there, not counting this. It's the inside part of it, not the seam. Okay, but then you don't sew it like that, because that would be a weird bag. You're going to sew it like this. And you want to have this go one way or the other. And I want my seam allowance to be a little bit less than what it's set at, so I'm just going to move my needle over. Maybe just one and a half. And I'm going to stitch this. Might as well back stitch. This is quite some bulk here, so take it easy until you know how your machine handles it, and if it doesn't like it, you're going to want to walk it through there and maybe even prop your foot if you need to. So I'm matching them up, and I'm going to try to mark my stitching line so it's the same. And this time I'm going to sew with this thing down, which is going to force it to flip in the same direction, which isn't critical, but it's kind of nice if the seams all face the same way. A little trouble backing up onto this, and so I've got a smaller back stitch, but I try to make sure and get in a real back stitch back there. Now I'm going to cut this side off, and these are the boxed corners. This one might be a smidge bigger than that side, but I think it's pretty good. And I think it's a sweet little thing. And so now we're going to take these corners, because we don't want to leave those raw edges in there. Even though the outside has raw edges, we're not going to do raw edges on our seam. Okay, so I've just cut off a little bit of this. It's not behaving as well as I'd like. I want to make that a little bit more gradual right there. It should extend about an inch past on each end. So I'm going to cut it about like this. I've put this in the machine so that I can start stitching there about 3/8. Here, to grade this out, I can snip this like this. And I can trim that out like that. And so I can get this down to where it's really a pretty reasonable amount of bulk, and I recommend that you do that. And it works pretty good to start past the end, go forward, and then back stitch to the end. So I often do that. Hope you can see what I'm doing. And then I'm going to go ahead while I've got my needle down, and I'm going to fold up this side and stitch over to it. So this is the side that I just stitched, and this is the other side. And by trimming out that little bit in the middle and by relieving that seam on one side, I've made it through without skipping any stitches. And I don't usually press these. I think if you just turn it out and really push it out, it's pretty cute and pretty okay. So this is what we did, and this is what the bag looks like on the inside. And I think that that is fine. I don't have a problem with it. Here's one that I did. Jeans on the back. This helps lower price a little. And it's finished off like this on the inside. So there's that one. My sewing desk table is going to be so messy later. Okay, so here's this one. This is an example of that fabric I told you about that I like to use that has writing on it. So this is, I live in Montana and I don't ride, or I'm actually allergic to horses, but this says saddle, gallop, ride. And so I've used this little Montana, rough and tough trot boots. I've used this cute little fabric on the inside here. So that's kind of fun. And I love to use ones with words, but I run out pretty fast. This one is quilted on both sides. It's just squared off at the bottom. And so you can see when I did this, that I did wrap the top and the bottom. And as I say, it isn't perfect, but I think it's pretty nice for what it is. We'll just keep doing them, and so I don't edit down to the ones I want. Okay, here's one, same story. See how I've accidentally flipped this that way? And of course, the truth of all these bags that you're seeing here is these are the dregs. These are the ones that I made last year and put out, and they didn't sell. And so this one, kind of a weird shape. It finishes like that, and then straight up the sides. And so this is a wrapped corner. That's a wrapped corner. Wrapped. So this has 5 wrapped corners total to make that shape. Now I just want to find if I have any other good fabrics in here. I used to have a fabric that said buttons and needle and thread and all kinds of stuff like that. And I used that for this, but those bags must all be gone. Oh, here's one I liked. This one I used matte fabric. And that's kind of a little different. And I kind of go by color. I mean, I like it to match or contrast in a fun way. But so, this is the wrapped corner that you do to finish off the bag.